Hi, in this video segment we're going to take a topic that we touched on briefly in the previous videos, deal with it a little more rigorously, and this is the topic of keys. Once again we're going to concentrate our attention for now on just the major keys. Minor keys will make their appearance in due course, and as this is a fairly hefty subject, I've decided to split this into two separate videos to avoid having to rush through things too rapidly. So, what do we mean by keys? Well, to recap, key is simply the set of notes that form a given scale. So, taking our familiar scale of C major, any tune that is written using predominantly the notes of this scale is said to be in the key of C major. Likewise, when we want to find chords to accompany the tune, we pick the notes from the scale to construct our chords. So if we began the scale elsewhere, say on this A, write a tune using those notes, create an accompaniment using those notes, we have a piece in the key of A major. And this major scale can be built anywhere on the fretboard using the same sequence of intervals: tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone, tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone, tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone. So for every note on your guitar there's a corresponding major scale, and hence, using the notes of that scale, a corresponding key. So what are these notes? Taking a look at your fretboard, there would appear to be rather a lot of them. But remember that the sequence of note names repeats at the octave, so the number of unique note names we have to deal with is the number of notes within an octave. How many of those are there? Well, we can count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and there's our octave where the whole sequence starts over again. So we have 12 unique note names, 12 possible major scales, 12 possible major keys. And what are the notes called? Well, as you may be aware, notes are named using the letters of the alphabet A through G. At which point you say, hold on, that's only 7 letters. We've just said there are 12 notes. What do we do about the other 5? Well, the first thing we need to know is which are the 7 notes that the letters refer to. And these are simply the notes of the C major scale. Why do we start with C rather than A? Well, who knows? Let's call it historic reasons and leave it at that. Just remember that the scale of C is our starting point. These are the notes that form the white notes on a piano keyboard. And they are C, D, E, F, G, then A, B and C. C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. So we can see that the notes that don't have letters allocated to them are simply the 5 notes which do not form part of the C major scale. First of these is the note in between C and D. So what are we going to call that? Well, this is where we use the system of sharps and flats. Sharp simply means up 1 semitone, flat means down 1 semitone. So this note between C and D we can call C sharp, that's C plus 1 semitone, or alternatively we could call it a D flat, that's D down 1 semitone. Which of the two names we choose in any given situation depends on the context, and we'll see how that works a little later on. So moving on up the scale between the D and the E, we have this note which we can call D sharp, or alternatively E flat. Now remember, the next interval of the major scale is a semitone, so there is no note between the E and the F. This means that E sharp would be exactly the same note as F, or as we might call it, F natural, to emphasise the fact that there are no sharps or flats applied to it. Likewise, the note of F flat is the same note as E or E natural. Between the F and the G, we have F sharp or G flat. Between the G and the A, we have G sharp or A flat. Between the A and the B, we have A sharp or B flat. And then again, no note between the B and the C, meaning that B sharp is the same note as C natural, and C flat is the same note as B natural. So now we have a name for all of our 12 notes. So we can start on any note on the fretboard, build our major scale, and thus identify the notes that fall within that key. When it comes to building a practice regime, I recommend you practice all your exercises, that is our common chord progressions, scales, arpeggios, any other exercises you may have in your repertoire, in all the available keys, and indeed in as many positions as possible on the fretboard, all the way from the bottom to the very top fret. I'm occasionally asked, why do I say practice in all possible keys when the vast bulk of guitar music is written using just a handful of keys? Well, a number of good reasons for this. The first is the basic principle that the better you know your instrument, the better the player you're going to be. So by playing in all possible keys, you become familiar with the whole of the fretboard, and this will generally feed into a better standard of playing all round. The other reason is that although you may not play in some of the more obscure keys, you will still encounter the chords from them in other situations. So you may never actually play a piece of music written in C sharp, but the chords of the C sharp 1-4-5 progression, that's to say C sharp, F sharp and G sharp, will still be found in other keys. They may appear in music in a different key as a kind of dramatic excursion from the key centre, just a momentary movement into a different key to add some excitement or tension to the piece. So you will meet these chords even if you don't play in those particular keys. And by playing the chord progressions, particularly if you take the 1-4-5 chord progression, once you've practiced that in every possible key, you'll have learnt at least one version of every major chord there is. And the final reason has to do with chord voicings. Now remember, you can play chords in more than one place. You usually start learning our basic C chord here, but we can play the C chord as a bar chord here, here, right up here. We can play it using just the top 4 strings here, or we can play a version using just the middle 4 strings here. Now any of these chord voicings that don't use the open strings can be easily transposed, that is to say moved, to any other position on the fretboard. So once you've learnt a chord voicing, a chord shape, which doesn't use the open strings, you can use that same chord in any key. So exploring the chord progressions in some of the more obscure keys can be a way of leading you to discover perhaps more unusual chord voicings, which can then be transposed back into the more familiar keys to add variety to your playing. Now when it comes to practicing in different keys, you could simply go through the keys in alphabetical order. However, a far neater way of doing it is to follow something called the cycle of fifths. And this simply means that you move the key by an interval of a fifth each time. So if you start with an exercise in the key of C, you will then move 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, A, B, C, D, E, F, G to the key of G, and repeat the exercise in the key of G. From G, you move G, A, B, C, D to the key of D, from D to the key of A, and so on and so forth, until you've completed the whole set of keys. Now there are very good reasons for following the cycle of fifths, rather than any other system, and these will be explained in detail in our next video session. Thank you.